And I've talked about the fundamental idea behind individualised funding as being grabbing that money that's whizzing from government to service provider and placing it under the control of the individual, of course, sometimes with the support of families, but taking it to the individual so they can make the purchasing choices and they can decide how they want it spent. But simply grabbing hold of the money doesn't quite do it in terms of achieving real control and choice. As we know in ordinary life, you need information and you may need guidance, good quality guidance, in order to make good purchasing decisions and to think through difficult issues around how best to spend money. Bearing in mind that, yeah, sometimes the sorts of amounts of money that are involved in individualised funding will be small, but we may be, well, there are people in the UK who are receiving £300,000 in individualised funding. What's that? $500,000, $500,000. That's exceptional, but it does happen. And to simply expect people somehow to, first of all, think about the best way to use that money, and then go on and find providers in perhaps quite complex combinations who will deliver the support. It's just absurd. So we need assistance for people to plan how to spend the money and to find the ways to spend it. They, of course, can do that in any way they want. They can go to their friends, to other people who received individualised funding for help. But I'm absolutely clear that one of the choices they need to have is the service of somebody who is competent, who has some regulation to guarantee that they bring a certain level of skill, who is not dependent with divided loyalties in some other direction, but can focus on that individual and that individual's interests alone. So for me, the easy name for that, it doesn't really matter, but we would call it an independent support broker. And any good individualised funding system needs to have that as a resource that's available. There are key issues and some challenges around how we can provide that. But I think they can all be met. We found the answers about how to develop regulatory systems, about how to take the dollars and enable families to use some of those dollars to purchase the services of the broker that they prefer, and so on and so on. But there's been an awful lot of confusion about what a broker is and what the role is. In the UK, there's a kind of negative view towards the word professional. Because it's been shorthand for people like social workers and care managers who've interfered in people's lives. And so when you talk about a support broker being a professional, that is seen as a damning criticism of the broker. But actually what we mean, of course, is somebody who knows their job, delivers it well on time in a good, efficient way. If you ask people whether they want that kind of service, of course they say yes. Suddenly professional means something much more positive. So that's been misunderstood, and I think also there's an assumption that a professional is necessarily accountable to government. No, it doesn't have to be that way. That we can have a market of brokers. I would prefer fee-for-service brokers, independent brokers, who will offer their services, enable the people who are requiring support in planning to get to know them, to choose who they want, to make a contract for the support in planning where they as individual need it. So an individual with a disability can have no help, if that's what they want, from a broker, or they can help in, let's say, the person-centered planning part of it, or in finding a provider who will deliver the support, advice on employment. Whatever is required, it's up to the individual with a disability to say where they want the help. I've trained a lot of brokers, and a big chunk of that training would be around person-centered planning methods, so people can be realistic about what their needs are. It's not about denying people have needs and those needs to be met, but also to say what I want my life to look like. Where would I like to be in 5 years' time? To develop that vision and then say, well, what part does service support or personal assistance support play in that? Does it have to play any part? Maybe some kind of equipment would provide the alternative. Maybe informal supports from people in the community would provide part of the answer, or even all of the answer. So it's a skilled task to put all those pieces together, to pull in the paid specialist supports where they're required, but not assume that they're the answer. To my mind, you can see decades of difficulty in achieving community supports and community inclusion for people with disabilities in terms of a conflict between big bureaucratic systems and the way that they think and the networks, the informal supports of community. They simply don't match. Problem solving for the bureaucracy is, well, we've got a problem, let's sit down and have a meeting about it. Problem solving in the community is, well, let's talk it over, let's find some friends. It's just a completely different mentality. And one of the things that keeps happening is that bureaucracies start to invade ordinary community life. Person-centered planning is a wonderful example where originally it was an initiative which was owned by families and by community. And then the bureaucracy said, well, we like this, let's make it official policy that everybody has a person-centered plan. And you see the heart taken out of it. So you have that kind of interface, that oil and water interface between the two sides. And I think one of the really important but quite demanding roles for a support broker is to be able to move between those two sides where necessary, to translate, to understand how communities work, to nurture the networks that exist in community, while at the same time being able to go across to the system side and explain what in words, in terms that the system understands, what the person wants to achieve out of life. So that is a very special role to my mind. I think other people would do well to understand that as well, but a broker needs to have a particularly strong set of skills in that area. If we look at misunderstandings around brokerage, I think there is a tendency, I'm not sure that it's deliberate, but in effect to misinterpret the role of brokerage by thinking about it in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is that people say, well, we need somewhere in the system, we need some information and advisory functions. So let's just cast around. It doesn't really matter where that goes. We just need that function to exist. And then so you end up with brokerage, those information and advocacy services, placed anywhere. If you follow that logic, you can have those services with a provider or with government or with anybody. But the really crucial thing, as I said, is to get the structure right and to get it strong, so you have the right people doing the right things and the relationship between the different actors in the individualised funding system set the right way and subject to regulation, so people don't start misusing the system to their own advantage. When I say people, I mean the providers, the government, whatever it might be. So we need to say, where's the right person? Where's the right position in this system for the information advice? And it must be a place that's independent, not attached to providers, not attached to government. So that's thinking about how you design a good individualised funding system is not about just listing functions. It's about saying we have a three-dimensional structure here with different players and different connections. Where do we put the different things that need to be done?